Okay, welcome to the Security 202 Advanced Protections for Malware, Phishing, and Spam in G Suite. My name is Andy Wen. I'm the product lead for Abuse and Security for Google Cloud and also for Google Inc. I'd like to introduce my peer, Nicolas.
Yeah, I'm Nicolas Kardas. I'm a product manager for Gmail security and the product lead for Google Groups.
All right, so this is Thursday of the conference, so the last day, and we're really getting to the advanced topics. So really appreciate many of you joining here. We had a chance to look at who was coming today, and I was like, these are really the heroes of your organization because many of you are involved in really protecting your enterprises. And so we want to dive into, we'll call this advanced track, advanced threats and advanced protections that G Suite offers for your companies. So protection in G Suite really starts with Gmail, like a secure email for your organization. Now what's great is that Gmail comes with a number of built-in protections for phishing, for impersonation, for malware. And so as we see many of our attackers trying to get into our enterprise, they're leveraging the email distribution channel. And so that's why we're starting with this topic first. And just to give you a sense of where we are, we understand how challenging this is because as Google, we use G Suite to run our business and we stay intimately in touch with many of the advanced threats that you're seeing. Let me walk through a couple of these. Some of these have been with us for quite a while. Phishing attacks have been with us since the start of email. And they used to be pretty straightforward, but they've grown increasingly more sophisticated, and they continue to be one of the leading sources of how attacks start. And if you asked me 10 years ago, would this still be the case? I would have said, well, we'll have solved phishing, right? But it changes and it gets more sophisticated. We'll get into some of the more recent examples that we have. Second is also email is the channel by which much of our malware finds its way onto endpoints. We find that over 2/3 of malware is installed via attachments. And increasingly, malware attackers are focused on corporate inboxes. Our stats show that corporate inboxes get 4.3 times more malware than a standard consumer mailbox. So if you're feeling like, wow, everyone's attacking us through this channel, well, there's some stats to go behind it. And then we have new threats. Ones maybe that we hadn't traditionally been aware of, but these are data breaches. 90% of the data breaches aren't necessarily from external attackers, but they can be from compromised insiders, they can be from negligence, and so the lack of admin controls and ability to see and remediate these threats is a challenge for you. And lastly, ransomware has been an emerging topic for many of us. Malware finds its way into the enterprise, and ransom will often encrypt files and paralyze your company's operations. If you don't have consistent and ubiquitous backups, this is a real threat to your business continuity and certainly makes the headlines, but is becoming a real risk for many of your enterprises. The good news is that as a G Suite user, we're helping you to be protected from attacks. And so Google uses its advanced machine learning tools and scale and sophistication to help you. So we're going to give you a little bit of some stats on what's happening across Google every minute to protect your companies. So first of all, we have a team, the Safe Browsing team, which is finding over 7,000 deceitful URLs, executables, browser extensions. These are bad things on the internet that we're finding every minute and protecting you from. Every minute, over 10 million spam messages are blocked from or put into the spam folder in your Gmail inbox. Every minute, over 6,000 pieces of software are reported through Chrome. And we take this information and we share it amongst other Chrome users, G Suite users, as well as the internet at large in identifying software that is unwanted or malicious. And then the breadth of our scanning infrastructure checks over almost 700,000 web pages for harmful software. So every minute. And then we're able to find 2 phishing sites and 1 malware site every minute. We take this information, we put this into our browser, into G Suite, and we also share this with the internet community so they can also protect other internet users. So it just gives you a sense of the scale and breadth that you're able to take advantage of as part of G Suite. So let's start with spam and phishing. And we start here because early detection of threats, either whether known or unknown, is really the beginning point. And if you can detect the threat early on, you don't need to remediate it later. If we dig into how we do spam protection, this is really one of our foundations because we're able to take the best of Google's machine learning infrastructure. We take the neural net AI models that are pioneered in other parts of Google and apply it to Gmail. We take the billion users who are using Gmail and the information that comes from that to provide 99.9% effectiveness at keeping spam out of your inbox. The reason this is important is because we take some of these same platforms and techniques and apply it to phishing, and we'll talk about it in just a minute. In addition, we take the user feedback. As users are marking emails as either spam or unsubscribing, we take that information and make the models even better. And lastly, we have discovered that some people's view of what's actually spam versus not spam is different. And so we actually have an individualized model, which allows you to get the email you want and none of the ones you don't on somewhat of a personalized basis. So it just gives you a sense of what are the foundation pieces that allow us to do a great job at phishing. Now, let's talk about some of the more sophisticated phishing threats. We talked about how phishing's advanced over the years. Gone are the days of princes and typos, and that was what I call phase one of phishing. The phase two was, let's use a brand name that your users are familiar with. This is maybe something that's commonly known on the internet or trusted. And increasingly, we've seen that become less and less effective. So the phishers have now moved on to something even more advanced and personalized and targeted. In the enterprise space, they're sending phishing emails which look like they're in the course of everyday business. So on the left-hand side is a link to a malicious attachment. This could be a document that you're often sharing. It looks like it's maybe a secure document. You need to click on it to open it. Well, when you click on it, it downloads a PDF. You open the PDF, and malware's now been installed. Sometimes these will install what are called remote access Trojans onto your user's endpoints, and that endpoint can be controlled by the attacker. Clearly a big risk. The one on the right-hand side is what we call a fake document share. And these are very interesting because they are targeted for your enterprise. If you look at the footer, it's got the name of a company. In this specific example, this company was a supplier that had done business with this company. The phishers are doing intelligence on your company before they launch these targeted attacks. And sometimes they're actually targeting individuals. And they're able to continue to do this at scale because it's effective, and they're finding your users to be high-value targets. Now, fortunately, both of these were detected and kept out of users' harm. So that's the good news. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we do this. We have 3 layers. First layer is within Gmail itself. We find these phishing emails, and we prevent them from harming users a number of different ways. We'll get into that in a moment. We have integration with the Chrome browser. If you use Chrome along with Gmail, you have an additional layer of protection because Chrome itself detects phishing websites and prevents users from getting to it. And then the third layer is our account protection. If you use Google authentication, we have additional ways which we feel like are the strongest, most effective ways to prevent phishing, which is security keys. And we'll explain to you a little bit about how that works. So on detecting phishing emails, we talked a little bit about our Google machine learning infrastructure. We're using that infrastructure along with 1 billion users to keep you safe by finding the phishing earlier than anyone else can with the most sophistication. In addition, we do delay suspicious emails to do additional analysis. This typically doesn't take longer than a few minutes, but when we do that, we can mine that for additional signals to confirm whether it is actually phishing or not. We do all of this in an automated way so that we can better protect our users. And then at the point that your user is clicking on a link, we do yet another machine learning automated check to see if this particular link now has new information as well as new insights we can bring. And we'll pop a warning to the user if we believe that this site should be something they should pay special attention to. And through a number of these kinds of protections, we're able to dramatically increase the number of phishing emails that are detected. One of the emerging trends is what we call business email compromise. I think this is the trade name for it, but it's also called impersonation or spoofing. And this is a case where it's not really a link that a phisher is trying to get your user to click on. They will send an email from someone who the user should know. Typically, you would target a high-value individual like a CEO or executive, and it pretends to be someone. It would be like a CEO emailing an administrator, a person saying, hey, I really need something urgently, and it's important, please send it to me. So this is my peer, Sam. I work with him closely. I trust him. And so he's asking me to send over some typical documents. And fortunately, G Suite's able to see, like, wait a second, this isn't the Sam you know. This guy comes from outside of your org, has the same name as someone you typically interact with. And so we pop this warning. We're over 99.9% effective in detecting these and preventing users from being fooled. So again, this is not exactly your traditional phishing attack, but it's still something that's impacting your user, and we've invested in these protections. So as we just kind of spoke about, we're using additional data sources, especially knowledge of your enterprise, when you populate your employee directory to power a lot of these protections. And then as we look at how users are interacting with Gmail, we've made significant changes in the interface in Gmail. And so if you're using our Gmail clients, whether on the web or on mobile, you're able to take advantage of these. Users get strong, bold security warnings that are quite difficult to miss. And these our studies and real-life practice have shown that it's working in terms of reducing the time that users would actually click through. In addition, we have the click time warnings that we talked about. And then finally, we actually disable malicious downloads so that users don't need to be careful. They're not able to hurt themselves. So we just got done talking about the email side. Let's talk about the Chrome side. If you use Chrome together with Gmail, you're able to configure from an enterprise perspective, how is it that your users are able to visit malicious sites? Typically, from a consumer perspective, we'll allow the user to click through. If they're able to find the ways to move forward, they can choose to do that. When users are motivated to get to something, it can sometimes be difficult to educate them because they're on their path to somewhere else. But as an administrator, if you have enterprise privileges onto Chrome, you're able to configure how these work. You can actually say, no, I don't want my users to go to these malicious sites that are known to be harmful to them. And so that gives you additional control as an enterprise admin. And also, we're going to do a little video of an announcement we made, I believe this week, about we call the password alert for Chrome browser. So what this is doing is it's detecting whether your users have accidentally put their enterprise password into a standard internet site somewhere else. And when this happens, the risk is that either it's the phishing site or that the enterprise password is in someone else's database. When this happens, we go ahead and prompt the user to reset their password, and you can say, hey, it's not policy for your enterprise password to be shared with anyone else on the internet. This has been extremely useful for Google, and we share this with all of our G Suite users as well. And we've implemented this for our consumer business as well. And so I wanted to talk on the topic of, the third topic of third layer protection, which is Google accounts. We have something called two-step verification, which is stronger than passwords because it gives you an additional layer of protection, but it is not perfect, especially in high-risk situations. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an example. This is what we call a man-in-the-middle attack. On the left-hand side, you have your user who's looking at a site. He doesn't realize that it's actually a phishing site. And you have a man in the middle. Usually it's not a person, but it's a proxy, which is proxying the traffic to the real Google website. And when this happens, even if you're using two-step verification, these one-time codes that are delivered via Google Authenticator or with SMS, these codes can actually be captured by the man-in-the-middle attack. And so as you can see, the man in the middle can capture that passcode and then hijack your login. And so even though you've taken an additional step of protection, it leaves you vulnerable in these man-in-the-middle attack situations. That's a pretty advanced attack. We're seeing it happen more and more. And so, this is a challenge that we all face. However, Google has a protection for this called security keys. So let me explain to you how security keys work. Same situation. As a user, you're not always paying attention to the right website name. As you can see in the bottom, that's not Google. It's close. A lot of people would miss it if they're in a hurry, and you'd have the man-in-the-middle attack. With the security key, what the security key does is says, is this actually Google or not? Now, the good news is technology is really great at identifying things that users might miss. And so in this case, security key says, wait, this isn't Google. You can't have the code. It's very easy for users to use. You plug it in, you tap it. You don't even actually have to type in the extra code. So in some ways, this is easier than two-step verification. And this works extremely well. The security key won't provide the code, and your users are protected. Now, even if the phisher was able to get the password, they don't have the code from the security key, and so they're not able to gain access to your login. That's the good news. In fact, it's earlier this week, it was reported that no G Suite account has been hijacked after security key deployment. So this is just sort of an example of how you can raise the bar in your enterprises to increasingly make it more difficult for your users not to be phished. And there's like the picture of the security key. It comes in many different formats, and both small, large, and mobile formats. So just wanted to make sure you're aware of this extra layer of protection for your enterprise. I'm going to hand this off to my peer, Nicolas, who's going to talk about malware.
Thank you, Andy. And to add to security keys, it's very, very cheap, actually, compared to the price of a computer. Security key is a range of $20. So that's really a protection that you should consider for your organization. So I'm going to talk about malware and what we do for malware protection. Google has an approach to have several layers of protections for malware. We use and we scan attachment across a number of engines, not only one, but several engines. And we also provide for unknown type of zero-day attack, we perform static and dynamic analysis. So the main point on this slide is really to show you that we do not rely on a single technology, but on the breadth of approach to identify the malware. We also have some purely heuristic, rule-based protection. We block executable from emails because there is nothing good about having executable in an email. So that's something we do, and since we started doing that, we've seen a significant drop in attacks, basic type of virus attack. We also provide the ability for G Suite customers to block encrypted attachments that comes to their domain from untrusted domain, or to block attachments with script. This is something that is tunable, configurable by the domain through the admin console, but that's an extra protection that we definitely recommend. Another approach of protection is the document preview. Actually, a malware is a file that gets downloaded and executed and opened on the machine. So by looking at these documents as a preview, which is the standard with G Suite, when users click on a document, they view it in a preview. They do not download the bits of the file on their machine. So it protects them. So that's also something that provides more security for your users. Now I'm going to talk about another type of attack, phishing apps. So Andy has been talking about phishing websites and what gets done in Chrome. What we're seeing emerging and is an application that gets access to the data through OAuth, and these applications are phishing applications. This is a serious risk, because once an application gets access to the data via APIs, the users don't even realize about it, and the application can continue to monitor and get access to emails and others. So what we provide with G Suite is a full control. The administrator has control about which application are authorized or not authorized, which one can be whitelisted. We recommend that G Suite customers really pay attention to that, because even as of today, that's not as big as phishing websites. This is something that is growing. We are also working on improving what we have. So that's internally an area where we spend a lot of time and we pay a lot of attention. So just to describe this slide, just to show how things work. So you have a user who wants to provide data access. So there's an application that requires access to the data. And in this case, the admin has not whitelisted the app. So when the users try to authorize for access to the data, the user gets blocked. I'm now going to talk about end-user errors. One of the things that we see is that some of the leaks of data come from users because they do not pay attention or they do not realize that they're sharing data outside with someone who is not from their company. So we provide visual indicators in Gmail to warn users when they're replying in a thread to someone who is outside their domain, for example. We also have data loss prevention as part of G Suite. So administrators can easily configure rules based on the content of files that are being sent outside their domain or inbound as well. So with these rules, administrators can add an extra layer of security based on their specific needs. And finally, this is a section where it's not only, I call it enterprise ready, and it covers different topics, but the main point is to show that the protection that we provide and that we build for consumers, we've extended them for enterprise. And we provide to enterprise customers for G Suite more controls on that. One of the main things for us is to provide a management for administrator that is simple. By default, users, when you create a G Suite account, you create a domain, you should be safe. That's our philosophy. You should not have to spend hours configuring security to be safe. So the default should be the safe approach, but it should also be configurable and tunable for your specific needs. So we provide analytics through G Suite Security Center. It was presented yesterday in the keynote for different type of attack attachment from Trusted Center on this slide. But we provide a range of analytics. I'm showing here an example of phishing protection that we provide that can be tuned by administrators. For attachment, for example, that's something we launched a few months ago. In March, we provide the ability for an administrator to block encrypted messages that come to that get received, or messages with script if they're sent from untrusted senders. That's something that we strongly recommend to use, but if for specific needs you need encrypted messages from untrusted senders, you can disable it, but it's something that you should enable, we think. We also provide protection via scanning linked images for phishing indicators. That's something we do for consumers. This gives us the ability to look inside the images that are linked inside in your emails, in the emails that you received, and that to provide extra protections. We also expand shorten URLs. So when a user receives an email with a short URL, it can be a phishing website behind that. So unless the users click on the site and looks at what's in the browser, user cannot know if it's a bad link or not. So what we do is, before the delivery of the message, we go and we expand the URL to see if it goes to a phishing website. And we provide several protection against spoofing and authentication. This is something that Andy just talked about. As an example, for spoofing, domain spoofing, we looked at domain names that are similar to the domain name of your company, for example, or emails coming from domain name that are the same but that are not authenticated. So we provide different approach. We also have a protection against employee name spoofing, and you talk about it. If you receive an email from someone with the same name of someone from your organization, we show a warning, and we have overprotection. All these policies can be activated at the organization unit level or for your whole domain. And as administrators, you have control about which action to take. You can decide to show a banner or to have these messages go to a spam folder. And finally, this is a long slide, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but the main message here is that we provide different layers of defense throughout the journey of the email. So before delivery, that's what we talked about earlier, like antivirus check, do or static analysis or sanitizing the email. But we also, at the time the user opens the message, we can prevent download if we see that the message, at the time the message gets open, contains an attachment that is not safe. We do that at the time of download and at the time of delivery. So it's in phishing or malware protection, time is important. The more time you get, or the more likely we'll be able to identify the malicious messages. So checking at download time gives us extra time. So we do that at delivery time and at download time. We also do check of links at click time. So that's also something that is done in real time at click time. And Andy talked about password entry and OAuth. I talked about OAuth earlier. So that's just a quote from the CIO of the city of Boston. Basically, customers have been pretty satisfied with the level of protection of G Suite for security and against malicious attacks. And our recommendation would be that you enable all the securities, or you do not disable the securities that are enabled by default, and that you tune your protection. And to conclude, the security keys is something that is really affordable and that really increase significantly the security for your company. So I think that's it, and we can open it for questions. If any of you have questions, we'd be happy to answer.